before we actually hear from all these wonderful people here, very quickly, the reason why we took up starting up again as a point of discussion here is, I'm sure many of you have ambitions beyond the startups that you're running today. And people we have on stage come with great wisdom. And we have an investor who's seen it all, perhaps. So we're going to start, and I hope you have great takeaway from this discussion and maybe inspire you in some way. Chaitanya, I'll start with you. You grew up in largely tier 2 towns in Karnataka. Your success eluded you in your previous 2 ventures, and then WakeFit happened. Talk to us about the grit and gumption that it took for you to even think of starting waking up and waking up to WakeFit, and also what sort of learnings from the previous ventures that you took to WakeFit?
I think starting up again, grit, gumption, with all due respect, I think those are words that media comes up with, and it's a good story to hear. But frankly, when you're actually going through those periods, it's not a nice time. So think about it. People who are entrepreneurs are type A, aggressive, ambitious, hardworking, alphas, and that behavior has got them success in every stage of life. They've studied hard, they've gotten into good schools, gotten into good companies, and every time they've exhibited that behavior, they've seen more success. And now you become a founder, and no matter how much you exhibit that attribute or those set of attributes, you don't taste success. Because entrepreneurship has so many things out of your control that it is not funny. So you can put in all the hard work you want, but there are a ton of things that are completely out of your control. And I think the first thing that happens is a lot of unlearning and humility building. That yes, there are a bunch of things that are out of your control, and there are only things that you can do that you know. So in 2011, when I came back from the US after living for 6 years, that was the time when Flipkart was raising funds, Myntra was raising funds. I was seeing it in the newspapers. And I thought, as a management consultant, I'm working 10, 12, 14 hours. How hard can it be to be a founder? And boy, was I wrong. Because the next 3.5, 4 years, I tried 2 startups, both in the consumer internet space, and both of them failed spectacularly. One was in the relationship space, where if you're single, you could find your partner, and if you're a couple, you could spend quality time over good activities. And the second one was an online community for women, which took, for the life stages of women, you could have all kinds of experts and their content to engage with. Both of them failed, couldn't get to Series A, raised angel, and then shut it down. And then there was a really tough period where I didn't know what to do with my life. And when I went back to the job market didn't know where to slot me. They said, you're a founder, you did it for 4 years, but what are you? Are you an ops person? Are you a salesperson? Are you a marketing person? So they didn't have any clue where to slot me. So I was getting jobs that were way lesser than what I was getting 4 years back. So from that period, there was a tremendous amount of learning where how I introspected quite a bit about how consumers behaved, how the team behaved, what we could have done differently. And then coincidentally, I met my current co-founder, Ankit, in a Sequoia-funded startup. And Sequoia was the first investor to take a leap of faith on us. And coincidentally, Sakshi and GV, they were the ones who take a leap of faith on us, saying that we can bet on them that they're doing something right. I'm sure
Sakshi will be able to help us with attributes of such, people with great courage. Anmol, I'll come to you. When we have founders who are trying to even figure out a decent revenue stream for the companies that they run, try to figure out business model, it looks, for some, it's almost like a work in progress all the time. You have 3 streams of businesses, and you're running it simultaneously. How do you juggle between the 3, and also in terms of focus, right? Which is amazing that you run these 3 different kind of businesses. So, help us understand, how do you focus, and What made you think that you'll be able to run 3 businesses at the same time and be successful?
I think the whole idea is about deprioritizing some things. As a founder, we can only prioritize the most important activity at that time.
Family is not one of them.
No, don't do that. But the whole idea is that we can only prioritize certain things. So as founders, you are good at some things and you're not so good at some things. And you need to have your team or your co-founder or your partners which are complementary to you. So for example, if I'm a great 0 to 1 guy, I definitely want more people in my team who think 1 to 10. If I'm a great finance person, if I have good fundraising capabilities, I want people who are more strong with ops. So I think it's divide and conquer. So we are able to, so for all of the businesses that we have, and we are doing them well in the way that it's all very structured. People know what they have to do. People come to the office every morning knowing exactly what they have to perform on. So it's just about aligning the entire interests of the group, and then it's magic, because sometimes some businesses do well, sometimes some businesses do, there are various business cycles, etc., which come to play. But when all of them do it together, you are on a different high. So I think it's good to be a serial entrepreneur managing multiple stuff.
So Anmol, each of these ideas were a spin-off of what you were doing earlier?
Yeah, so I was a clean energy entrepreneur, started with clean energy, loved clean mobility, so got into clean mobility, but I am educated as a petroleum engineer, so got into oil and gas. So that's...
So you didn't want to let go of anything that you knew.
Such compelling opportunities, how do you leave them?
Lovely. Vivek, it's a completely different story. You perhaps have seen and have been associated with perhaps in modern India's biggest retail brand story. And you've seen also the best and worst of times. Now with Broadway, what are the learnings that you've taken from that? And how difficult was that period to see like a brand that you were associated with and then move on? Was there any baggage at all when you started Broadway?
See, I think, in any consumer business, I think the fundamental starting point is that the business doesn't stay the same. Right? So, even if, let's say, the journey with Future Group would have continued, I think there is always a reinvention that happens in 5 years. So I think, let's say, when we started thinking about Broadway, I don't think so the baggage was really a problem. Because I think we are trained to think in a manner that what will be relevant for the time of today. We are trained to think through that, where are the gaps in, consumer behavior, consumer engagement, what is it that the market really wants. I think that comes a little naturally, I feel. So I think that was easier and the more exciting part of it. I think from the journey between, let's say, being part of Future Group, and then, let's say, there was a journey in COVID where, there was a insolvency journey. Anything takes time, right? I don't think so that one can say that, it just flipped, we could take it easy. I think it's a journey. It takes you 6 months, 9 months. But I think as entrepreneurs, I think there's one thing when one introspects that, most entrepreneurs have resilience, I feel. Most entrepreneurs have tenacity, most entrepreneurs have perseverance. And I think the more you, read about some of these things, the more you read about stories about this, it helps you come out of, a lot of behavioral traits about yourself in terms of how one needs to think ahead. I think that journey could have yielded only 2 ways for me personally. I think one could have been a journey where you could have yielded in your own thoughts that why it happened, why is it so bad, so on and so forth. Or actually creating a new business is what gives you energy. And, that energy is what takes you ahead and carries you ahead. Luckily for me, that happened, I think.
But Vivek, for you, the pyramid was almost inverse. You were coming from scale and now starting up, right? So, how do you adjust when you're not dealing with scale? Or is it a challenge at all?
It's a massive challenge. And like in consumer business, unlearning is something that you always do. I feel I'm doing my first business right now, almost, because I think the starting point is different. The kind of teams we are able to bring in are very, very different. Is it great fun? It's amazing fun. Is it something that I feel will have my legacy on it? That's what keeps you going. I think those are kind of motivation factors vis-a-vis what you did earlier.
But yeah, it almost feels like it's my first business that I'm doing right now.
Lovely. Talking about legacy, Keshav, I think we have covered GVK as a group, right? And for you, perhaps your family is known as, one of the infrastructure giants in India. Father, grandfather, all of them are out there. People know them, and then you choose a completely different path. Was it difficult to convince your grandfather, father that no, my path is very different? And also, is there any learning that you take from Mr. GVK Reddy and also Sanjeev Reddy?
No, thanks for that question. Actually, it's quite funny because the previous panel is super relevant. I'm on both sides of the table.
Agreed.
And I feel both sides of the table exactly so. I mean, going back, every 5 years, we actually built a new business from 1990 in a different industry. And it actually takes a very rare gene to do that. You look at most family businesses tend to stay in the same line of business and ancillaries. And that's actually something that we have owned over the years. Infrastructure was just very, very well known. And over the last decade, there were many other businesses that have become very large. But when I went to college in MIT and came back, I realized actually innovation in tech is going to disrupt every single business unless you have a strong balance sheet or some licenses or large plants. And I always felt like, building something of scale was super exciting for me. So after, we came back, we transitioned from GVK as a family business to Reddy Ventures as a family office. And this has happened to very mature family businesses in the West. So we have done that, and now I've jumped into one of the businesses which is called Equal, and I'm building it from scratch as a founder. So I just came from GFF for 3 days, and it's exciting. 2 years old. Last month from zero, we've now done 55 million transactions in a month. So that's exciting for me, and that scale is what excites me. And then professional management can take over.
So staying away from family business helped you?
Yeah, see, family businesses don't innovate. If somebody tells you, they put capital and resources, but find people to innovate. So when you actually step out, like what Vivek was saying, you can really think and build from scale. So right now, we're incubated 5 businesses, which over the next 5 years, you will say, oh, that's so obvious that, you should have been in healthcare AI, you should have been in identity, you should have been in financial services AI. But that's the excitement. And all the, the pharma business or the data analytics business, they're all professionally managed. Takes up so little amount of time.
Interesting. Sakshi, we've heard from the entrepreneurs. You sit on the other side of the table. When let's say a founder comes to you, who perhaps has run successful businesses or comes on the back of failure, to an investor, what matters really? If there is a founder who's coming with a string of failures, does it matter to you? And also, is success or having run a successful startup, is it a necessary barometer that you would say when gauging a founder's ability to run business? And we would love to hear any anecdotes. I mean, may not be taking names, but if any interesting founders that you've met and something that you thought stood out.
Yeah, no, so I think in our business, we think failure teaches you multiple lessons, and hence a founder who hasn't been very successful in their prior startup is, we love that actually, and we're extremely excited to meet like a second-time founder, irrespective of, what the how the first venture landed. Because I think there are some qualities inherently that only a founder can possess, and someone who's already run a business versus, let's say, backing someone completely raw to run the same set of business. I think most of the investors would put their chips on a founder with experience. And hence, I think, failure is not a bad word in our business. In fact, many investing firms also hire ex-founders simply because, just the relatability factor is so high. When they speak to the new set of founders, that you want to get into business with, or to be able to help founders think through situations. So I think it's a huge asset either ways, whether in the firm or whether you choose to back them. I think some qualities that really stand out with founders with experience are grit, Founder has to be very gritty, even in good and bad times. And someone who's seen cycles is obviously has only survived due to sheer grit. Founders are unique animals who have the capacity to dream big, and I think that's really important as you're building a business. And I would say the third, outside of course the more obvious ones, I'm just stating what things that we really look for. I would say the third thing is to tell a great story and inspire, because as you build the business and as you scale, you have to have the ability to not only sell to your investors or tell a great story to them, but also hire really, I would say, talented people from the industry, or convince them to join you, and then hold a team of very talented people together. That takes a unique capability. It takes a certain amount of storytelling and inspiration. So I think some of these things only come together when you've had experience in life, and that's best demonstrated by an ex-founder.
So would it be fair to assume if you are to start up again, probably you should be doing it post your 30s or 35 years?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
So would it be safe to assume that starting up again is a great journey once you cross the threshold of, let's say, 30 or 35, and you've got life experience, and perhaps the chances of your venture being successful is a lot more? Have you seen founders mature with age and get better in terms of decision making once they are a little older compared to 20 something?
I think that holds across for all of us, founder or non-founder. Age does teach you a thing or two. But, look, I don't think if someone gets it right the first time, you just keep building. And let's take the example of Zepto. It's not our portfolio company, but it was started by two boys who dropped out of college, and they were under 20. And they've built an incredibly good business. So some people just get it right the first time, and I don't think age came in their way. But of course, do I believe that they'll only keep getting better as they keep growing older and maturing? Of course. But they had a great starting point too. And then there are some people who just grow up with experience, so it cuts both ways.
Sure, thank you. Also, a great part of being a founder is the mental makeup, be it how you take success and failure. And given the rate of startup failure in India is high, we are guilty as well that we write about the celebration of entrepreneurs, but 10 years down the line, is this startup going to exist? Will it be not there? Is something that even none of us know. I'll start with you, Chaitanya. What do you think, in terms of a mental makeup, should a founder have just when he's approaching his venture? How do you mentally prepare yourself, and what are the do's and don'ts of being able to go through that journey?
I don't want to sort of take the tone of advice. Maybe I'll share what I learned from those two startups and then what I brought it to WakeFit. Maybe I'll talk from the perspective of team members, customers, and how it changed me. From the perspective of team members, I believe that relationships are an infinite game. I had built a 10-member team over those two startups, which failed. And when the second startup had to be shut down and I could no longer afford to pay, I realized that they had all stayed with me for 4 years, working below market salaries, really slogged it out, but then they're failing as much as I do. So over the next 3 months, 9 out of 10 of them, I managed to get them jobs in Bangalore at a higher salary, which is more closer to the market reality. And that ended there. But then when I started WakeFit, out of the 9 people, 4 people came back and joined WakeFit in our early team.
Amazing.
So it was, again, relationship. Similarly, when I joined the Sequoia-funded startup Tapzo, and that's where I met my current co-founder, we just worked hard, but when WakeFit happened, we left. But then when Sequoia wanted to fund us 3 years later, the ref check that they did was with the founder of that startup. And we didn't know at all, but he has given us good feedback about us. So I said, relationships that you build are not because you want something out of them. You just build it because it's the right thing to do. So that was a big learning for me, that whether it's team members, whether it's customers, whether it's investors, relationships are it's an infinite game. You cannot do it because you want something out of them. That was the first thing. The second thing was from the consumer side. What I learned from those 2 failed startups was no amount of focus groups, interviews, observations are ever going to give you the insights that you actually creating an MVP and iterating on it and learning from what they actually do gives. So talking, observing, listening, they're all good, but ultimately what you learn is how they behave when a product or service is in front of them. Will they open up their wallets and spend for it? That's the big learning. So today at WakeFit, we have built the company to be led by consumer behavior. Any problem we face today, we pick up the phone and speak to 100 customers. And that DNA has percolated across the company. So any new product manager joins, any new marketing person joins, any problem they come to me with, please go find 100 customers, go talk to them. And then come back to me with what your hypothesis is, what you want to test, and prove or disprove. So that has become a core part of DNA. My lunch break is filled with hearing customer voice recordings from calls. So we are constantly led by consumers, and that is the holy grail of how we believe it can be building a sustainable business. And the third part is about myself. I read somewhere that entrepreneurship is almost like self-purification. So I cannot believe the kind of evolution I've had over 13 years, 3 startups. And after you see that you're down to your last 800 rupees, you don't know what you're going to do for the next meal, you don't know how you're going to pay the team's salary. After you've seen that, nothing else scares you. Nothing else feels bad. So you figure out a way, and next morning you wake up and you find a way to solve whatever is in front of you. So I think it really changes you. And I've seen both. I've seen people become very cynical and jaded, and I've seen people who've become very humble and absorbing everything like a sponge and becoming better and better as a person. So I hope that I always remain on this side.
You clearly are on the latter side.
I hope so.
Sure. Anmol, has, three ventures changed you as a person, and do you see any changes in you in the last 10, 12 years as an entrepreneur?
No, so my philosophy is good day I'm okay, bad day I'm okay. Doesn't really matter. Absolutely.
Sab changa si.
No, good day I'm okay, bad day I'm okay, doesn't matter. So have to be very mission driven. You could win a Fortune 40 under 40, but still go and work 16 hours tomorrow. Or you could do anything. You could have a very bad day when you lost a customer, but still go the next day and improve yourself. So doesn't really matter. I don't think emotions play too much part in at least in my journey. It's about just putting in the amount of hard work and just keep on building. So
Anmol, is that a personality trait, or have you inculcated that over years?
no, actually, I've seen that if I become too happy, me being too happy doesn't impact the business too much. Me being too sad doesn't impact the business too much. So might as well keep doing what I do good. So just keep doing the job.
Sure. Vivek, for you, the journey from Future to now Broadway, how has that changed you as a person? And in terms of learning that you've taken from your previous stint, how do you apply that? And, what drives you as an entrepreneur today compared to, say, 10 years ago?
So I think the latter part of the question in terms of what drives me today. See, I think when I was at Future, obviously you are working under a very large umbrella, and I think a lot of time what you do, the impact of it is not always measurable to what you do. So I think one thing which is very satisfying today for me at least is that whatever one does, the impact is very direct, very measurable. You can actually simply know what, changes in your own behavior can create an impact on the business, which potentially didn't happen earlier. So I think when you are in a journey where you are building a young business, I think that role of the founder in terms of, I just feel right now that the number of places that you kind of spend time in can create such a disproportionate impact is, I think, just phenomenal. Which I think we, in some sense, couldn't do earlier, because I think when you are running or part of a larger umbrella organization, I think you end up spending time on many other things which may or may not directly, I think, create an impact on the business. So I think one definite learning for me is that, when you are running a 0 to 1 business, which I did actually earlier in Future as well, but I think now when you're running a 0 to 1 business, I think just being very meticulous about what are the 3 things that will create maximum impact, and just getting and allowing yourself to spend time there. I think very important, and one can see measurably what kind of happens. I think the second thing obviously is, there are so many learnings in terms of, what you kind of carry forward. I think this idea of, building culture, and I think the earlier panel touched upon it. I think, because I think I had the opportunity to see what culture could do when the organization scales. I think the emphasis that we put today on the Broadway team and the culture and how we want to build it actually gems a lot from that. Because at the end of the day, I think in an organization, one thing that survives is culture. Right? And I think culture needs to survive not when you're a 10-member team, or 20-member team, 100-member team, or a 1,000-member team. It has to survive through that. But the culture, the root is set when you are a 1, 2, 5-member team. So I think that if there is one thing I would like to say is that I think I've seen in terms of, very specific things that maybe happened in future, why it happened, what we could learn from it, what we need to therefore do today when we are in a 0 to 1 phase. And I think that's amazing. And many, many more stories about it.
But Vivek, having family around when you're running a business and not having them around in your next venture, does the family cushion play any part when you're a part of a group, and then when you branch out on your own, does it have any impact, or does it change the way you think?
Massive impact. I think when there is family around, I don't think so. You always feel the buck stops at you. There is always someone who can figure out something if you're not able to figure it out. I think when you're building a venture by yourself, that option just doesn't exist. I think there is an inherent feeling in your mind that you have to figure out everything. There is no one else who's going to go figure out even one thing for you, right? So I think that's a big change. And I think that change really impacts the way you behave. That change really impacts the decision you make. It creates an impact at every level. So,
Keshav, similar question to you. Does family cushion, play any part in decision making, or does it provide a cushion when it comes to you making bad decisions?
I think family, I'm just taking a step back from your question. I was just thinking about, what really matters to an entrepreneur. And when your earlier question was, when you have a tough day, you're always happy. But most entrepreneurs are irrational. Most. And startup entrepreneurs for sure. That's how they get through a lot. And I feel I love the excitement of scale. So that's what drives me. And that's what drives a lot of entrepreneurs actually, seeing something grow in whatever form and factor. So that has always driven me as a person. So when I was in my first startup while I was in college and undergrad, that drove me. Today it drives me. In large scale businesses, it drives me. We run India's largest healthcare foundation. I sit on the board of that company. That 108 EMR ambulances, we finished our 1 billionth phone call, right? And we have saved about 30 million lives a year. But then I come back to Equal, where we're just scaling up early days, and that also drives me. So I think incentives, motivation is really important, and everything around it is just a facet. In terms of family, I think my family is my biggest supporters and my biggest critics. So even though it's a company that I'm building, but it's part of the family office. So family office gives you the blend of family being there as your mentors, as your guys, but you get to do what you want and ensure that you are accountable by the end of the day.
Sure. Sakshi, also, we've heard from all these people in terms of what it takes to be an entrepreneur and probably look at success and failure. If you were to sort of advise the young entrepreneurs that we have today here, what are a couple of things that you think that a founder should perhaps inculcate or grow when it comes to how to deal with success and how to deal with failure? What would be your piece of, 2 or 3 takeaways for them to say that, okay, this is how, things are going to be all right. This is what you need to do.
I think all the people here who've been selected chosen to be 40 under 40 don't really need any counsel from me, candidly. They're always smart achievers.
They will always be all ears to an investor.
But I would say that maybe just a few things, as the role of a founder keeps changing. When you initially start up, the founder is probably a specialist in a function, or maybe 2-3 responsibilities across the org. But I think as the organization keeps growing, the founder has to also think about her or his, development in the journey. So at some point you have to, I would say transition from being a founder to the company CEO or, see yourself. And that means developing cross-functional responsibilities, leading an org, setting the right culture. And that often is very ignored. So, and I would say that can only happen if the founder consciously invests in his or her development. And one of the best ways to do it is just surround yourself with some very high quality people who you can trust, because being a founder is an exceptionally lonely journey. You have very few people who can actually stick their neck out for you, and you're quite alone in all the decisions you take, especially when things don't go right. So if you can have a few well-wishers or advisors who can really speak to you and help you, especially when the chips are down, that is invaluable in my view. Invest in yourself, invest in your journey and your growth. So a lot of founders of mid-sized or very scaled organizations often have a coach, because they don't know who to depend and lean on to discuss some of the ongoing challenges of the organization or the business. So I think that's probably the only advice I would give to some of the founders here. Otherwise, I think they're quite smart.
Lovely. Chaitanya, again, for the sake of all the winners here, what are, let's say, a few do's and don'ts that you would want to share with the founders here when they're looking to start up again? Business decisions or other takeaways that you think you got from your earlier journey. And
Sure. I think now I'll probably give very quick answers. One is intellectual honesty. If you're really honest about what made the previous ventures fail or what made them succeed, that's a very, very good starting point, because we humans have the tendency to take credit for the successes and blame externalities for failures. But if you're intellectually honest, then you will know your role in success or in failure. That gives you true learnings from what has happened. And second is, I really believe that you should treat all the people fairly, your team members, your investors, your customers. And if you do that, it will always pay back in spades. Those are the only two things that I want to leave with.
Anmol, what would you want to share in terms of?
So two things. One, cut your losses in time. No point if something's not working out, don't just don't stretch it too much and lose more money on it or lose more time on it. So cut your losses in time. And the second one, I think, create wealth for everybody, for the entire team, for your vendors, for your collaborators, for everybody. So create wealth for everybody, not for just for the founding team.
Sure. Vivek, what would you say are some of the do's and don'ts if somebody is wanting to start up again?
Something to start up again, I think you have to have a very strong reason to start up again and to maybe even start a venture, because I think if that reason doesn't exist from within, I don't think so you'll have the tenacity to go through it. So I think one has to really think hard in terms of why you're going to do it. Will you do it for 10 years? Will you do it when no one is going to back you? X, Y, Z. And I think if you're able to answer it, I think that's the only time one should do it, because I think that will give you the best chance of success.
But Vivek, do you think it's even possible for someone who's starting up to think 10 years ahead, or is it a journey that on the go you realize that I can sustain or not?
No, not 10 years. I think 10 years, who knows? I think that I'm not saying. But I think the reason I'm saying, why would someone want to get into a journey of entrepreneurship? What would that mean for them? It cannot be flimsy. It cannot be. I think obviously it's become such a celebrated space right now, right? So I think there's so many people who want to do it, but also I think that creates the reason why there is so many companies that maybe don't make it. But I think that if you are clear why you're doing it, I think you'll find a lot of answers to keep sustaining it. And I think if you can sustain an idea for 5 years, you'll find an answer, right? So I think if you have that tenacity, you will get there.
But, honestly, we've seen so many of them who haven't even the need to be famous or be there, like rock star founders that we end up seeing these days. Should somebody even aim to be? Is that the reason why somebody even should look to be a startup founder? Do you see?
Everyone can have their own reason. Maybe if that's what drives you, and if that's a reason where you can really spend your life to achieve that, why not?
Lovely. Keshav, you're both an investor as well as a founder. So how does it, how do you juggle the two hats? And is there interlearning that comes to both the roles that you play?
So before I became a founder, I also started our family office VC fund and invested in about 30 companies in software. So what you learn as an investor is absolutely invaluable as you become a founder, because you realize that things take time, capital doesn't solve issues, people are really important. And if you're only an investor, your mindset is slightly different. And if you're only a founder, your mindset is different. So I think it's a blessing to be both sides of the table, and you're able to value what's important in both sides. So,
Sure. Sakshi, if I may ask you, when a founder is coming to you to start up again, a couple of things that they need to keep in mind when they come with a pitch to you.
Frankly, for me, the starting point is really why is the founder pursuing the journey she or he has chosen to do. And alluding back to what the point Vivek just made, most good founders have come up with their business idea because they experienced a real sore pain point or a need where they thought there was, which was ready to be solved and completely being overlooked by the market participants, or rather the incumbents of that industry. And hence, that's where the idea was germinated that, so I'll take an example of, let's say, WakeFit. I love the fact that when Chaitanya and Ankit pitched to me and my colleague that, where they asked me like, what brand of mattress do you sleep on? And honestly, I couldn't remember. And then they said, did you buy it? I said, no, I didn't buy it. I just outsourced it because the whole experience was so shabby, right? Imagine going into a dealer store and then, you've been, they show you like some 20 mattresses and they can't tell the difference between one from the other. So that whole, I would say, customer journey was so broken and the experience was so broken. And then when Chaitanya reminded me how many hours of my life I spend on my bed sleeping, it just suddenly dropped a penny that, this is such an important pain point, and, and it's not the best sleep that I have. I sometimes wake up with a stiff back, and you could account a large part of that to, the quality of the mattress that you're sleeping on. So I think most founders either suffer or incur that pain point in their journey, or they are able to identify, a very sore pain point in the market, and hence that's the idea of disruption that comes through. So I think I look for founders with a lot of clarity in terms of what they are building and why. And then, of course, like I said, just the whole storytelling is so important. To be able to articulate what you're building and why it'll be different and disruptive is very important. At least in the early stages, this is what we largely need to see. And then, of course, it has to make a lot more financial sense. If it's an ongoing business, then, what we look for is the viability of the economic engine. But, yeah.
You spoke about gritty founders. If, one has to ask you in terms of weightage, when perhaps deciding to fund a startup or not, what would be your weightage to how the founder is, the grit of the founder and business viability? What would be more important to you?
So I think grit is tested over time. There's no way to identify that in the first conversation. But I would say that what we really look for is the uniqueness in the idea and the dream or the vision the founder is articulating and how disruptive that is. And look, founders have the unique ability to really zoom out into the future and see that how this idea will, grow and disrupt the industry. So I think if they can carry us along, that's a great starting point.
Lovely. I think we can take a few questions from the audience as well. Can we have a mic passed over to the audience, please? Sure. Anybody who has a question, request you to raise your hand. I think we had a few written on a piece of paper. We have a gentleman whose hand is up there at the back.
My name is Prasad Rautre. I've just started. Thank you for inviting me here. I just wanted to hear you all. I run a company called Zivica. This is a human capital management marketplace, trying to organize a B2B ecosystem where we can supply properly and meet the startup community's pain areas of starting. My question that I have is, I liked, and I'm 51 years. I just left Airtel as the Chief Business Officer, so I do not belong to the crowd here as 40 below 40, but I feel like that. My question to you is, it's not necessary to fail, I guess, right? You don't have a choice at this age. So what are your advice to people who are above 40?
I mean, I would actually encourage each of you to share your thought here.
Look, that's just a number. 40 is just a number. So don't. What would be my advice to you? Look, just build a good team, and make sure that. But before you build that big team, make sure that the business that you're building genuinely has PMF, product market fit. So I would say that since you come from the industry, go test your business idea with your ex-employer. And if they are willing to be in business with you, and you're able to really address a pain point for them, then clearly that's one good proof point of PMF. But as a startup founder, I think that's most important. You have to get the product or the service really right, and hence, you have to establish that you have PMF. Once you have PMF, then you start thinking about next set of things you have to do. But I would say this is your primary solve in the early days. Don't let age come in the way. If it doesn't work and you fail, so be it. Take a step back and maybe think of something else. Because let's say that you can continue to run till you're 70, 75, so you still have many years ahead.
Keshav?
I think there are two large biases. One is people think startup founders are young. But the problem is actually very successful startup founders, few are very young. Most are actually in their 40s, late 30s, early 40s, because they've seen a career path and learned a lot. So I think age is just a number. The second thing I've realized is that startup founders also feel in the early days that capital will solve everything, right? Raising capital solves everything. And that's absolutely wrong. If you find PMF, like what Sakshi said, you will get enough capital. And that's one of the things that you realize, that disproportionate amount of money goes to the best companies because they figure out something that others didn't. So those are my two advices for you.
I just feel that be fearless here. I mean, honestly, if you're building a young company, you will have to take bold bets. Obviously, be careful about what decisions you make. But I think only with bold bets will you be able to kind of, have an idea which is disruptive, which will be able to, work through a market, which will have multiple players trying to do something. And I think if let's say you've got the product market fit, if you've surrounded yourself with great people, and if you have, the grit to see it through, you'll get there. But yeah, be fearless.
I think the same principles apply to any startup, whether the founder is 50 years or 20 years. The business made sense, great team, some amount of funding. I think that's the holy grail of whether you're 20 or you're 50. So it doesn't, I would apply the same principles, perhaps if I was starting up at 50.
Chaitanya?
Just two things. To achieve product market fit, capital is not the reason. First principles thinking is usually the answer. And secondly, until you find PMF, please keep your fixed costs low. Your rentals, your salaries, that gives you tremendous amount of freedom to iterate and try it out.
Are there any more questions?
Hi. Hi, Chaitanya. It's me, Ajita. I generally wanted to ask you, since you are kind of, my question was very specific to D2C brands. So there was a time we all wrote extensively about D2C brands kind of overtaking the legacy brands, and now from whatever I hear it is the legacy brands who have a distinct edge because they have brick and mortar distribution in place. So for the next level of growth, what is it that the D2C brands need to do now?
I don't know about the other industries, but in our industry, the answer is pretty straightforward. We play in 3 sectors: mattresses, furniture, and accessories. In all of them, the unorganized part is probably 90% of the overall market, and organized is very small. So if we start worrying about legacy companies, new companies, that is a zero-sum game. But I think the true growth lies in converting the unorganized market to organized. And that's where we work very hard at. So ignore the competition, keep an eye on what we can learn from them. But the focus is solely the customer, where there's so much of unorganized. And if you truly demonstrate value, they will come and they will believe in you. So for us, that's been the way. And to get to 1,000 crores in 9 years, it's a very, very, very small part. There's lots more to do together, and so we are excited about that.
Vivek, I would like to have the same question to you, because you are creating a brick and mortar platform for many of these D2C brands through Broadway. What really is the challenge? Are they stagnating because distribution is becoming a challenge for them?
I think when we look at India, and I think we do feel that, and Bloom wrote about it extensively recently as well, right? That I think whichever category you operate in, I think one needs to really get a reality check on terms of what's the size of that market. Because I think any new D2C brand is built with a particular kind of narrative, story, and the reason why they exist in that consumer's life. I think over time, if the brand doesn't expand itself to, grow their TAM, the stagnation is very real in India. So my view is that brands will have to keep growing their target market that they address. Because in India, at least whatever I've seen, I feel that, up till a point, the growth in customer numbers doesn't happen or happens slowly. So if you're able to add more categories, if you're able to add more products, I think that's what will help, brands grow and go to the next level. Yeah.
Sure. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Do I see any hands go up? I think it's a great chance for you to ask questions and probably also great learning. Okay, we don't have any more. And on that note, thank you all for joining us here today.